I have been very blessed. I met Krishnamurti dozens of times from 1965 until 1985, many, many times. Mostly in USA, in Ohio, but periodically in India or in England or in Switzerland. And at least from my understanding, he was one of the most remarkable human beings in the 20th century in India, a great sage. And there is a general tendency in many of his remarks, and also generally in the Krishnamurti circles, that he was somehow against the tradition. There is some truth to it, because he would occasionally actually even point out that the word treason as well as tradition have the same etymological root. You can look it up in the New Oxford Dictionary. They both have the same etymological root. Because in a certain way, what usually gets said and done in the name of tradition, for example, in India, many of those Pandits and Brahmins, as if they are carrying on the tradition, and what are they basically doing? What is the heart of the tradition? So Krishnamurti, in a way, very often actually spoke almost as if against the tradition, and was not very happy to have people reading the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras or the Bible or anything. And in fact, Pupul Jayakar once told me, Pupul Jayakar was, I think, secretary or president of the Krishnamurti Foundation in India. I don't remember the exact title. But that in the Krishnamurti school in Varanasi, they had some images of Krishna or Shiva, and that whenever he came to that school, they had to remove those images. But after he left, they will put them back there, which is quite ironic, which is to say that he was against them having the images of the what would be regarded as the great sages or incarnations of God in the Indian tradition, Krishna or Shiva. So in a way, there is something quite right about him expressing a sort of wishing to be free of the tradition or being even against the tradition. But then on one occasion, we were having a walk in Ojai. I'm sure most of you know. Ojai is really where he spent most of his time in California. It is about, I would say, 100 miles north of Los Angeles. And I was quite surprised. Suddenly he turns to me. He says, "What do you think is wrong with India?" I wanted to just hear his remarks on it rather than me saying, although he put this as a question. So I waited, and he says, "The trouble with India is that the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition." This is his remark. By Brahmins, I don't think he certainly wants to meet some kind of a caste orientation in India, which can become too occupied with it. But anybody who is a searcher, wishing to connect with Brahma, which at least in the Indian context is the highest reality, literally simply meaning the largeness or the vastness. Sometimes, especially Annie Besant ends up translating this as the eternal. And his main concern at that time was that somehow the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition. What is the heart of the tradition? At least according to my understanding, and one can read this carefully in the Bhagavad Gita or in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the heart of the tradition is an impartial self-inquiry to see what is driving me, what is holding me from searching for truth, what gets occupied, where do I get occupied. And Krishnamurti himself actually made this remark somewhere else, that without self-inquiry, there can be no wisdom. Self-inquiry is absolutely necessary to see what in me is driving me, how can I reorient myself to connect with something real? So that is really almost the fundamental requirement of the tradition. To imagine that this is not part of the Indian tradition would be absolutely crazy. As I just said, you can see this in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Yoga Sutra, a very strong call for impartial self-study, swadhyaya. But tragically, things in any culture tend to degenerate. If you look at the contemporary Sanskrit English dictionary, the first meaning of swadhyaya they now give in that dictionary is studying sacred books. Any of you who have even the slightest background in Sanskrit know there is no complexity about this word. Swa plus adhyaya, self-study. But what gets expressed now as the meaning of that word, in fact, on one occasion I remember mentioning this to Krishnamurti, that the contemporary dictionaries are saying this, and he was feeling quite agitated by this. Often in public he would not use a remark like this, but there he says, "Damn it, sir, what is the point of studying sacred books unless you study the book of yourself?" That is really the serious call, to study the book of oneself. But let me, on the other hand, if any of you have seriously undertaken this, you would realize there are two more or less immediate dangers associated with self-study. One is fantasy, as if I'm specially chosen by God, so I should perhaps kill all the infidels or whatever, that kind of fantasy. The other is great fear, because in principle, even contemporary scientists would agree with this, but certainly from the spiritual traditions anywhere, in principle, the whole external cosmos is mirrored inside me. So in the Indian tradition, very strong call to find one's identity with the highest spiritual element, or the way it gets expressed, to find that your Atma is identically the same as Brahma. But at the same time, if Brahma is in me, but the rest of the universe is also in me, so is the devil there. And any serious searcher, whether they are expressed as searchers or in the biblical tradition, tendencies to just call them prophets, because God has called them initially rather than they are searching for something. But the Buddha, for example, or Siddhartha Gautama, before he becomes the Buddha, he goes out for a search. So he's tested by Mara, the demon or the devil. Similarly, Christ is tested by Satan. So I'm simply reminding you that if they are tested by the devil, sure as hell, any one of us who undertakes any serious spiritual inquiry or self-inquiry would also be tested by the devil, because we have not only the divine element in us, but also the demonic tendencies. Just a simple reminder that both in Hebrew the word Satan and in Pali the word Mara, both of them literally mean obstacle. What stands in my way? And to become aware of the obstacle is very helpful. So there is no reason to be against the Satan, to find out what is standing in my way and how can I possibly overcome it. But in any case, whether I overcome it or not, it is inevitable that self-study or self-inquiry is not an easy task. People can get frightened and can leave it. In fact, the Sufi sage Rumi makes this remark, if you have not yet seen the devil, go look in the mirror. Therefore, very strong suggestion, perhaps much more emphasized in the Sufi tradition or in the Buddhist tradition also very strongly, to work with other fellow searchers, Sangha. And in fact, even Krishnamurti, initially he was not speaking about it very much, but starting about 1978 or 79, he began to emphasize very much that many people should come together and to investigate something or the other. Because then one begins to realize that what is true for me deep down is also true for everybody else. If it is really true that my deepest self is identically the same as Brahma, why is this not true for everybody else? So the positive side is easier to accept. But similarly, this negative side, the demonic aspects in me are also in everybody else. And therefore, it is very helpful to work with some fellow searchers rather than just working alone. And the same thing, as I said, was beginning to be emphasized by Krishnamurti later on a little bit. But let me come back. There is a strong tendency, as I said earlier also, as if Krishnamurti was against the tradition. This is completely nonsensical as far as I can see. It is true that at a very lower level of the tradition, like just worshipping the images, etc., he was not very keen about it and wanted the images to be removed. Although personally, I think that itself is not very helpful, what he was saying. We don't need to just simply buy it because Krishnamurti said it, because Krishnamurti almost always spoke from Mount Everest, from the highest level. Most human beings, certainly myself, I'm not at that level. Each one of us needs to begin from whatever little level we are at. And therefore, even the images of Krishna or Shiva or something can assist us. Gradually, one may then wish to be free of it, as is actually a classical example of this, of Ramakrishna being very much worshipping the image of Kali, periodically going to the temples and worshipping Kali. But finally, one of the great yogis comes to him and essentially removes the image of Kali from not only from the temple, but even from his mind, and he's freed. It is true that ultimately the one, whether we call it Brahma or God or Allah or whatever, it cannot really be described. Therefore, one needs to be free of everything that I know. Very strong suggestion in one of the Upanishads that a searcher, when he's done with his learning, returns to himself. So, in a way, sometimes in my personal understanding, Krishnamurti was always speaking from such a high level, as if everybody is at that level, could understand him or hear him. That was hardly the case. Therefore, why remove these images? Or why not study the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras, etc.? So we don't need to just get stuck because Krishnamurti said something. Many great sages say something, but they speak from such a high level, which is not where we are. So we need to be very careful about this. But very strong suggestion in all serious scriptures, more particularly emphasized in India, but even in the biblical traditions, particularly when those aspects of the Bible which are not wholly occupied by the churches. The establishments are the problem. And my sad feeling is that that is what is going to happen in the Krishnamurti circles as well. Oh, this is what Krishnamurti said, as if that's just the end, rather than searching for something oneself. This will be a great tragedy, in my judgment. Just because Krishnamurti said something doesn't make it true, unless it is true for me. I need to search what is true for me. Periodically, I happen to meet him in many different ways, sometimes just alone, one-on-one, many times, just going for a walk together. But sometimes there'll be a small gathering of people. And whenever I would ask him some question or the other, he would just insist that everybody can see this, as if everybody is at the same level as Krishnamurti. And then, to me, that was not so obvious. So on one occasion, he said, "Do you think I'm a freak?" I said, "Yes." See, freak can have a very negative meaning, as if one is degenerated, but it can also mean that one is unusual, extraordinary, not ordinarily the same. And in fact, after that, more or less following that suggestion. I even said to him, to me, it seems obvious that your mind is at a very different level than my mind. It's not therefore necessary to think that he's a freak. That's not what I was trying to convey. And he agreed with me that we sat together, looked at there was a pot of flowers on a little table in front of us. And I said, please, you describe how does your mind relate with these flowers? And I will describe how my mind relates with it. And it's quite obvious that what your mind does is different from my mind. To me, it seemed absolutely obvious. But then he described that his mind is like a mill pond, that a vibration comes, but very soon it settles down. But then he looked at me, he says, but your mind is like a mill. In fact, when Krishnamurti passed away, the Quest magazine people had called me in Halifax, in Nova Scotia, in Canada, if I could write an article on Krishnamurti. So in fact, I sat down and wrote that article, which is called Mill and the Mill Pond, a 20-year conversation with Krishnamurti. And in fact, the Indian branch of the Krishnamurti Foundation, when they had their 100th anniversary, with the Dalai Lama had launched a book. This is the first article in that book also. This has been reproduced several times by the Krishnamurti people in many places. So clearly, they are struck by the obvious fact that there is an enormous difference in the quality of mind of Krishnamurti and a simple man like me, ordinary man. Mill and the Mill Pond is the title of that article. But this is really where part of the problem is, that he always seemed to speak from the Mount Everest and always then insisting as if there is no way from here to there. In fact, even this is one of his remarks, not my remark. Effort is an abomination. It's interesting to pay attention to this. If I am at the lower end of the mountain, is my effort to walk up is an abomination? He's right there at the top. He doesn't need to make an effort. But one needs to also understand that maybe what he's really trying to convey is something that is very strongly conveyed in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna. Nash karmaya, actionlessness. But in the Bhagavad Gita is very clearly expressed. What does that mean? It means not an action coming from my will, my desire, my wish to conquer something, but can my action become an instrument of Krishna's will? So in a way, Nash Karmya can be translated as actionlessness, but Krishna goes out of his way to point out that that is not meant to mean no action. In fact, he gives his own example. Krishna says, I have nothing to gain, but if I were to stop working, all these worlds will perish. So a very strong call to undertake the appropriate action, but not the action for my glory or for my gain, but becoming an instrument of Krishna's will. Nash Karmaya is the expression in the Bhagavad Gita. So perhaps this is very much what Krishnamurti is trying to convey. But then in usual English to say effort is an abomination doesn't quite seem to mean the same thing to me. And one therefore needs to question, what the hell is he saying? Do I not need to, for example, read a book? Do I need not to sit down quietly? What action is an abomination? Just these simple remarks, and then sadly, at least in my experience, occasionally I end up getting invited in some Krishnamurti circles. They just sit there and keep quoting Krishnamurti as if that's the end. Nothing needs to come from their own inquiry about themselves. Just this is what Krishnamurti said, and that's the end of the meeting. great tragedy in my judgment, what we are going to do with the teaching of Krishnamurti, who in my judgment actually brought many remarkable things. Let me give you an example here. Why does he say effort is an abomination? This is a report by Laura Huxley, who was second wife of Aldous Huxley, who was a close friend of Krishnamurti, but he had passed away. Laura Huxley on one evening had a gathering of some friends. There were 5 or 6 people there, including Krishnamurti. And in that exchange, as I said, this is not my report, this is Laura Huxley's report. Krishnamurti said, don't try to do good. So people gathered there were somewhat surprised. One of them said, but you're going around the world every year doing good. Krishnamurti said, not intentionally. What does this mean? Because for him, in fact, on another occasion, he and I had this exchange, he said, a rose does not decide to smell like a rose. We recognize the rose from its fragrance. If there is some goodness in you, it will ooze out of you. Not that you try to do good. So when he says action is an abomination, really what he, in my understanding, pointing out to, that it is much more important for something to emerge from something deep down in you. Don't try to do this and this and that, but like a rose, its fragrance would be recognized, or its presence would be recognized from the smell. So whatever is in you will ooze out of you. That is very much the call. And therefore, really the implication of that from my perspective is to enhance the quality of one's being. And this was really the fundamental call from all serious teachers. You can look at Patanjali or the Buddha or Christ or Bhagavad Gita or any great texts or great teachers. The call is to focus more and more on my being, the quality of my being, rather than the more and more enhancing my knowledge. They are not against knowledge. Nobody is against knowledge. Except Krishnamurti sometimes conveys that notion as if he's against knowledge. And here, let me point out another example of my meeting with him. I had many, many meetings with him. I'm just simply mentioning a few. There was a large encyclopedia publishing many books on the various religions. 2 books on Christianity, 2 books on Hinduism, 2 books on Buddhism. And so the 2 books on Hinduism, first book is called From the Vedas to the Vedanta, and the second one is Flowering of the New Tradition. And they decided, or somebody suggested it to them, to have an article on Krishnamurti in the second volume. First of all, here just as a footnote, which other religious text will include Krishnamurti? Do you think he could be included under Christianity or under Judaism or under Islam? He is very much coming from the Hindu tradition. It is possible, at least in my understanding, that he could possibly be included in the Buddhist tradition, but even there it's unlikely. He would keep denying he's not a Hindu, he's not this or that. Like Rumi even said, I'm not a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian. So it is true from their level, or from their perspective, all these labels are pointless. But on the other hand, which volume do you think in the Encyclopedia of Religion will include anything on Krishnamurti other than the volume on Hinduism? So in any case, they asked me to write an article on Krishnamurti, the editor of this volume. And Krishnamurti was still alive. This was in 1984. So I thought, well, I'm going to speak to him and to see if this is the heart of his teaching rather than me saying something, unless it actually corresponds to what he would agree. So I had a meeting with him, And I said, it seems to me the heart of your teaching is awareness beyond thought, intelligence beyond thought. As you know, he had a habit of saying sir very often. He says, sir, take the risk. Then he comes and puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, if you speak from your heart, whatever you say I have said, I will agree I have said it. So personally, I feel responsible that I have been given this, both a benediction and a freedom from by him to speak as if what Krishnamurti said or did not say, but if it honestly comes from my heart. So from my heart, I say, taking this risk, that really what he's calling, what all the great teachers are calling in the whole of the Indian tradition, namely to connect with something by direct perception rather than by conception, rather than by thinking about this or that. The very first substantial sutra in the Yoga Sutra is the second sutra in the first chapter, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This is the call. Yoga is stopping all the movements of the mind, going beyond the mind, above the mind. So I had said that it's really intelligence beyond thought is what Krishnamurti is trying to say. One may use slightly different words, but the call constantly in all serious spiritual teaching is not to be stuck with your mental knowledge, because many levels of reality are subtler than the mind. Mind cannot grasp it. Heart can actually be resonated by this. So there is often a call to feeling much more than to the mind. But here I just gave you this example that he has allowed me, if I speak from my heart, and I really wish, that is my effort. Whenever I say anything about Krishnamurti, sometimes I disagree with him, sometimes even say that he got stuck with the highest mountain. That doesn't help ordinary people like me, who need to learn how to take the next step far below the Everest. So I may even be critical sometimes of him, but I assure you, I wish to speak from my heart, and I have freedom from him that he would agree with me. I'm sure he'll keep his word. And therefore, to say something like that effort is an abomination, well, it depends at what level one is. He doesn't need to make any effort. And here I give a very simple, another example, another conversation with him. He said to me, well, the sun is shining. You don't need to do anything about that. True, the sun is shining. I said, but if I don't remove the curtain, I can't see the sun. So that's the effort required from my side, at the level where if I'm in a dark room inside with the curtains drawn, something is required from my side to be available to see the sun. Of course, he said, oh, you're too clever for your own good. That's one thing. And that's a way of stopping an exchange going from further or from saying anything more. But I think again and again I point this out. To me, it seems absolutely obvious that some effort is required from our side to be available to this radiation or radiance coming from the sun or from the divine energy in many different ways. In fact, this is where I personally very much appreciate a remark of Albert Einstein, hardly a negligible scientist. He was occasionally asked, slightly different words are used. He was asked, is creativity a matter of chance? In a religious way, one would say, is wisdom a matter of grace? But we don't need to worry about the language here. This is, he was asked, is creativity a matter of chance, or is it a matter of hard work? Now, if Krishnamurti would simply say work is an abomination, so there'll be no theory of relativity. Einstein's response was, ultimately, it is a matter of chance. Every sage throughout human history would agree that ultimately the blessing has to come from above. It has to come from God, if you like, or Allah, or whatever expression one wants to use. But Einstein then said, but chance seems to favor the prepared. What is required from my side is to be prepared even to be helped by chance. It is true that ultimately it is from Brahma or from God, but do I become able to accept something, to receive something that is radiated from above? But always a suggestion, this is particularly emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita more than anywhere else, in my understanding. I need to do my part, but ultimately to nash karmya, no action. And the suggestion for that is initially to undertake whatever I regard as the right action, but not to be attached to the fruits of that action. Karma phala tyag. Because not everything depends on my quality of my action or quality of my own being. Many other factors are involved. What he calls devam, will of the divine beings or the devas. This is in the Bhagavad Gita. So it is true that ultimately it is not my achievement. In fact, complete freedom from me, that is always the call in any serious teaching. In fact, just to remind you, one of the great texts in India actually says, when one goes to the sun door, one will be asked, who are you? If the answer is anything other than nobody, you may not enter. So it's a very interesting call to work more and more and more to become less and less internally, as if by which one means not less and less, but more self, not self-occupied, not my action for my achievement, my honor, my wisdom, etc. How can I become more and more free of me? That is the constant call by every great sage. Certainly, as I just quoted from India, or it often gets dying to oneself, or Christ says in the Gospel of Matthew, unless you leave yourself behind, you cannot be a follower of mine. So it gets expressed in varieties of ways, dying to oneself or leaving oneself behind, being free of oneself, many different ways. But always the call that I do my part, but then not be occupied with the fruits of that action, allow something else from a higher level to take root of this. In fact, Meister Eckhart, who was one of my favorite Christian mystics, in fact, even says that ultimately, not even to try to do the will of God, because even that is coming from your idea of what God is, what is His will, then maybe you'll gain something from this. Ultimately, not even trying to do the will of God. He calls it complete poverty, spiritual poverty. This is his remark. I think my impression is that the kind of spiritual poverty he's speaking about is really more or less a complete freedom from me. My importance, my being approved, my richness, my wealth, my whatever. That's the call. Maybe I'll mention just one other incident, and then I will be happy to have people either bring their own points of view or to raise any questions if they wish. This was in 1979. I was coming from a conference in Hawaii. I live in Canada, in Nova Scotia, which is on the other end of the continent from Los Angeles. So on the way, I was with my wife, and we decided that rather than we had to stay overnight in Los Angeles to catch a flight next day to Halifax. And Ojai is about 100 miles north of Los Angeles, where Krishnamurti used to live. So I called Mary Zimbalist. Some of you, I'm sure, probably everybody here knows that Mary Zimbalist for many years was really more or less taking care of Krishnamurti. You might call her his secretary. Sometimes I think she was his nanny taking care of him, but that doesn't matter, whatever. But she was certainly very, very helpful to him. In fact, his place where he was living was just a kind of a side entrance to her own house. So I phoned her and she said, well, I know Krishnaji would be very happy to meet you, but he's exhausted. He has just given 4 or 5 public talks. And as any of you who actually heard him would know, he always spoke with great passion. I'm not surprised that he was tired if he had been speaking for the last few days. And so I was a little disappointed, but then she called me back saying, I know he would like to really meet you, but please promise you won't raise anything serious. So I promised that I won't raise anything serious. So we go there, arrange just about lunchtime. I'm sitting on his left side, and Mary Zemble is on his right side, and my wife is sitting on the other side of the table, opposite us. And throughout lunch, he kept holding my right hand. He was not eating very much. And as you know, coming from India, eating with one's left hand is not the usual practice. So I wasn't quite easily even eating my lunch. But he, at that time, this is 1979, so by that time he was already 84 years old. So not a young man, and was probably not eating very much. So whatever came from me, I kept saying, Krishnaji, it'll be nice to go for a walk afterwards, it's nice weather, trying to say something just superficial so that we don't engage into anything large. But then everything in one's life is not driven by oneself, at least not in my life. All kinds of forces enter sometime or the other. Somehow it came out of me without really meaning to do this, that every insight influences our body at a cellular level. And it turns to me, sir, as you know, he had a great habit of saying, sir, should we go into it? Mary Zemblis is looking at me with dragon eyes because I have betrayed my promise. So I said, oh, Krishnaji, not now. I'm not feeling well. Maybe afterwards we go for it. No, no, no. This is significant. So he sent somebody to bring a tape recorder. And so we have no choice now. So then we have this exchange for nearly half an hour. Mary Zimbalist was very annoyed with me. So immediately after lunch, I decided, even though we have to go back to Los Angeles, rent a hotel, it's not cheap to do all this, but that I was not going to stay in Ojai, so we went back there. 3 days later, the phone rings in my house in Nova Scotia. And my wife answers the phone. She says, it sounds very familiar, but very formally he's asking, may I speak to Professor Ravindra? If any of you have been in North America, nobody has this tendency of calling you Professor Ravindra or Dr. Ravindra. It's a very different kind of attitude than in Europe or in India. So it turns out to be Krishnamurti is calling me 3 days later. Now, where the heck he got my phone number, I have no idea. Why would he not have somebody else call me and then give him the phone? But somehow he managed to get my phone number and he phones me. This is Krishnamurti on the phone, saying, what you had said 3 days ago, I have been thinking about it. Now, this is a man who often insists that everything is instantly delivered, instantly clear. This is what he's been thinking about for the last 3 days. This is his own remark. I'm merely quoting him here. Can you come and see me for half an hour? Now, this is Krishnamurti. I am 4,000 kilometers away. For him, as you know, throughout his life, he was funded by somebody or the other. He didn't have to do any job to get any money to find any food. So can you see me? Come and see me for half an hour. On the other hand, it is true that this little iron magnet, iron filing has no freedom from magnet. I had another conference in London, England. So I flew from Halifax to London via Los Angeles, if you look at it geographically. So now, of course, I was an invited guest. And this might even surprise people here. I often point out that one can get so stuck with all this. The people who were in charge of the Krishnamurti Foundation at that time, this is 1979, in Ohio, I'm forgetting their name, a couple from Sweden, if anybody here knows them. They invited me for dinner at their place that evening, and you may not believe it, served me wine, which in the Krishnamurti circles is regarded as a terrible thing to do. But now, because I was an invited guest. So Krishnamurti and I went for a walk. This was before dinner. And earlier, a journal had asked me to write an article on Krishnamurti, but I had written this as a kind of a letter at that time, which was many years before this meeting. And I was quite certain that he would not have possibly read it. Who would send it to him? And he probably received hundreds of these things. But I had now brought this with me because I had written this asking a question in that letter. I had, rather than writing an article about him, I had more or less written like a letter to Krishnamurti. And so he said, okay, he'll read it carefully and that we'll talk about it next day. Now, hardly anybody believes it. He made breakfast for me next morning. And most people in India think eggs are non-vegetarian. He used to eat eggs. He was a vegetarian. So he made omelette for me next morning. And so we had breakfast together. And then he said, I have read that letter that you wrote to me. The remark that struck him, this was basically it's a long letter, but the remark was that I said, I can understand that a bridge cannot be built from here to there, but can it be built from there to here? Any teaching that is being originated from the human mind, imagining this can connect us with the divine, is the bridge from here to there. But if it is in fact coming from the divine mind, it can connect with the human beings. He said, that is what I have been teaching for the last 60 years. And that most people don't understand it, especially the people of scientific background, which is actually true, because in the scientific background, very strong emphasis that we can figure it out. It's coming from us. So the bridge, from a scientific point of view, the bridge is to be built from here to there. It's the conviction. And whereas from a spiritual perspective, it needs to come from the other side. Then if you're called by the journey, you can undertake the journey. In any case, I think my own impression is that those who are struck by the teaching of Krishnamurti, I certainly am. He was one of our greatest 20th century sages in India, in my judgment. We need to not only honor him, to listen to him, but more importantly, to understand what he's trying to say and to see if this is true for me. In fact, I say this about any scripture, including the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutra. If you are a serious searcher, it is very important not to be a believer. Just keep repeating what Krishnamurti said. It all sounds very nice. But is this true for me in my own experience? And that is, in fact, again, certainly when I studied the Yoga Sutras, etc., I think that is assisted if initially, as a searcher, you undertake to disagree anything that the Yoga Sutra is saying or what the Bhagavad Gita is saying. If you say, I'm going to disagree with what Krishnamurti is saying, genuinely try to follow your own search and to see, then you may be possibly forced to agree with him, but it actually helps to learn more by initially trying to be against what he's saying, disagreeing with him. That's my experience in any case. But in any case, it's all very nice to learn something one way or the other, whichever way. But absolutely any teaching, whether it's coming from Krishna or Krishnamurti, or we can keep saying Hare Krishna, or we can keep saying Hare Krishna Murti, Hare Krishna Murti. It's the same thing. It doesn't lead to any truth. But then, on the other hand, at the very best, any teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. If you get so attached to the finger, you'll never get to the moon. So learn from Krishnamurti, but don't just keep repeating what he said. Don't get stuck with it. That is my suggestion, my call. I was absolutely blessed and hugged by him hundreds of times. And I'm a great admirer of Krishnamurti. He was one of our great sages. But just to say, because he said this, therefore this is true, is not true for me. Thank you. Please feel free to, you don't have to agree with anything I'm saying. In fact, that is one way to understand what I'm saying, is to try to disagree with it genuinely, not merely to disagree, but see why you disagree. Or ask a question.
Yeah, may I say something?
Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi Ravindra. You have studied very deeply. You have meditated. You have asked very beautiful questions. And you are quite right that what Krishnamurti is saying has been said by many sages, but their words were different. And Krishnamurti had his own words, but underneath the words is very, very similar. So I have been also debating, having some dialogues with people who are very strong followers of Krishnamurti, and they say that Krishnamurti himself said that tradition is in one direction and Krishnamurti is in the opposite direction, and both cannot be true. But I find that it is because people are deeply attached to Krishnamurti and his words that they are not able to see what Ramakrishna or Buddha or Ashtavakra or Shankaracharya have said. And so in this group, I have been also talking about Kabir and Krishnamurti, Ashtavakra and Krishnamurti, Ramakrishna and Krishnamurti, Shankaracharya and Krishnamurti, Buddha and Krishnamurti. And in my mind, because I am interested in all these people, there are sometimes a dialogue happen between Krishnamurti and Ramakrishna. If they meet, what kind of meeting they would have. So I have written about such dialogue between Ramakrishna and Krishnamurti and between Buddha and Krishnamurti, like that. So I feel that uh, at one time I also felt that Krishnamurti, at the end of his life, he felt that nobody understood. But why he should feel like that if he was doing something which he really loved to do, then it doesn't matter whether somebody is able to understand him or not, because Bhagavad Gita says that all you can do is to do your work, and out of affection, out of love you do, then the result doesn't matter. But it seemed like Krishnamurti was not happy. On the other hand, Buddha, when he was dying, he was very happy that so many people really understood and became free. So uh, this tradition, it has really affected even ordinary people, and even the film songs like Naame Bhagwan Hu, Naame Shaitan Hu, Dunya Jo Chahe Main To Insan Hu. So such songs, तुझ में राम मुझ में राम सब में राम समाया सबसे कर ले प्यार जगत में कोई नहीं पराया. So that thinking that you are the world, what is something divine is in you, is in me also. Such philosophy has been very great philosophy, and maybe Krishnamurti lived most of his life outside India and he did not know any of the Indian languages. So he had really not gone deep into Indian culture and what he knew about Indian philosophy only through somebody else telling him, and then he is making comments, and he had no need to read, of course, all this traditional philosophy. But if he had an open mind, he would have seen that they were really speaking from great depth, and Krishnamurti did not know what kind of life the sages and rishis lived because he had no contact with. He had met only intellectual professors and mostly like that, any great, really a mystic who can really communicate non-verbally with him. So, and also, Krishnamurti was talking about forming a nuclear group of people who will be deeply interested in Krishnamurti and make this movement forward. At that time, I had told Krishnaji that, sir, such a nuclear group cannot be created, but it can happen if people are really free from their selfishness. And Krishnamurti said, what do
सुनो
you mean
संजय.
that? And Krishnamurti said, what do you mean that such a group cannot be created? And I said, and Krishnaji said that the schools just did not happen. He had to do a lot of work to create the schools. So I said to Krishnaji that you can create a school, you can create all the structure, buildings, you can make people come together. But to create a group, it doesn't happen by one's will or desire. Only when people are really free, then such a group can come by itself. So there are many, many things I have to say, but I would like other people to make this uh, beautiful meeting ahead. Thank you very much.
Sir, sir, do you want to answer this? Do you want
No,
to make comments, Ravi sir?
no, I don't have any special answer here, but I would very much agree with him that it is true that Krishnamurti, although people forget that he practiced yoga every day, so it's not that he was wholly unconnected with the Indian tradition. In fact, Deshikachar, who taught him yoga, also taught me yoga. So we often spoke about this, that Krishnamurti was very serious about yoga and practiced almost every day. And he was also quite happy occasionally to hear certain things being recited in Sanskrit texts. So I don't think, strictly speaking, that he was, and besides, he actually came from a Brahmin family, and right at birth, his mother had said that he seemed slightly unusual or different from his brothers even. And when Leadbeater saw him on the beach in Adyar, his brother was also next to him, and other friends were there. But clearly, Leadbeater had a special feeling for perception or certain special kind of understanding. So he selected this one man. On the other hand, at an ordinary mental kind of level, his younger brother could enter the university at Cambridge or Oxford, wherever it was. I've forgotten which university. But Krishnamurti did not succeed. He could not enter that university, but his younger brother did. So, at a certain kind of intellectual level, one may even say, which was partly implied by you, that he does not seem to have read the Indian classical texts, etc., or not very clear about them. That is possible.
इमली है, tamarind.
But at the level of real understanding, real wisdom, I think he was very high, at least in my understanding. So thank you very much. Chaitanya, please speak.
Chaitanya sir, Chaitanya.
I
Chaitanya,
can,
please.
yeah,
Can you unmute yourself, Chaitanya, please?
I have unmuted myself. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
I see two more people have raised their hands. If they want to speak before I do, it's okay because I can wait.
Yes.
Shakti ji. three more people. So it's okay if I speak?
Yes, please. This is how many times do we have to say?
Now, you see, there are a few things I want to. I have heard you in the past also, Professor Ravi Ravindran. I have met you in Rajghat and in Vasant Vihar also. And when you gave the talk today, I could recall many of the things that you said to us in your earlier talks. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. Now, there are a few things that I want to point out. I think a person who spoke against tradition and regretted the fact that tradition has lost its soul and he spoke against tradition in many ways. I think we should, when we try to prove that he was still part of the tradition and actually he didn't speak against tradition, I think it's like an insult to that man who was very original, very authentic. Now, there are just a few points that I want to make here. Like you gave the example of self-inquiry, sir. I think yes, the dialogue is not meant to be just a polite conversation. What a conversation. What I'm saying is out of utmost respect and politeness, sir. So don't think that I'm being impolite and rude and very blunt. But you see, when you talk about self-inquiry, I have a confusion. When Kay says talks about self-inquiry, he talks about a self which is which we all know about, like it's a like a bundle of memories. When the Indian Vedantic tradition or other spiritual traditions talk about it, they talk about a self about which they already share knowledge with the seekers. They say it is this, it is you are that self which is a witness consciousness, which is eternal, and so on. So if you already describe what I'm supposed to inquire into, then what is the meaning of an inquiry? So Krishnamurti, on the other hand, says begin with the self as you know it, as a bundle of memories and so on. I'm just expressing, sir, what I think about self-inquiry in the light of what Krishnaji says. And another thing, uh, uh, another aspect of the tradition that he is staunchly against is the Guru Shishya tradition in the traditional religions. And Krishnaji says very clearly, without mincing any words, that the Guru destroys the disciple destroys the Guru. And he doesn't believe in it ever. He never met a disciple. He never wanted anybody to treat him as a Guru. Now,
Although
you
almost
also
everybody did.
yeah, but you also, sir, you also talked about different levels of, not directly, but you kind of hinted at it, different levels of spiritual evolution. I remember a very long talk which has been published in the form of a book also between a Swamiji and Krishnaji, where he says to Krishnaji that there are different people who are different levels of spiritual evolution. They are like Uttamadhikari and Madhyamadhikari and Adhamadhikari. And Krishnaji says, no, we have to talk to everybody, and who are we to judge? And then he also says that what you say is also in the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. And he says, I have not read the Upanishads. So you see, that's a way of just setting aside all traditional authority. I think one big reason why Krishnaji denounces tradition is because it becomes an authority, a psychological authority for many of us. And he says, if you are already a slave to an authority, how can you inquire? Because you need freedom to inquire. And that makes a lot of sense. And so levels of even in Rahula Valpola's dialogue with Krishnaji, when he says that there are so many things that are similar between what K says and what the Buddha says, his very brief response to him is, "Sir, why do you bring in the Buddha?" So, I mean, there is at one level a complete rejection of all spiritual authority, and if we say that it is not true, then I think this is like an insult to man's authentic pure teaching, because he talked about it for 60 years, and it was not for nothing that he talked about it. There's one more thing, sir, that I want to point out is Many people I've met, like senior trustees and associates of Krishnji, after he passed away in recent years, like last 10, 20 years, they talk a lot about their association with Krishnji, their proximity to Krishnji, that they spent a lot of time with him, they had walks with him, they had dinner, and so on and so forth. What is it that they are trying to say? I mean, are they saying that a person who has spent 50 years with Krishnji is a spiritual more evolved than those who have never even seen him, those who have never even met him? Because this is, I've seen it in many, many people who would say, oh, Krishnji was like operating on me. He visited me even after his death. I was visited by, I mean, so many things which I think Krishnamurti would himself never have liked, in my opinion. So I just want to ask, I'm very curious to know because this is not something that I heard for the first time. I've heard from many an associate, many a friend who were who keep on saying, they say, oh, I was very close and this is what he did to me, this is how he hugged me, this is how he talked to me. And what is it that they want to say? What is it they want to say? I think that's all because I'm not supposed to be a speaker. I'm a participant, so I don't want to take more space. I can see there are three people already waiting for their turns. So I'll stop here. I don't want a response. I'm just wanting to share some observations that I had, and I think that's it for now. Thank you, sir, for your interesting talk this morning.
Ravi sir,
Thank you.
You wanted to comment on this?
No, I don't need to comment anything on it. I hope that in the Krishnamurti circles, we don't simply keep saying, he said this, he said that, Hare Krishnamurti, Hare Krishnamurti. But if we would really take him seriously, as this gentleman Chaitanya was trying to point out, is to have an impartial self-inquiry. That is stressed by Krishnamurti, stressed by all the sages in India. So why not to take it seriously? But it's all very nice to say Hare Krishna Murti, Hare Krishna Murti, or Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. That's not going to assist what he's trying to teach. But if that's what speaks to you, that's fine with me. So, Mr. Murthy, if you wish to speak, why D Murthy?
Yeah. Please unmute
Good,
yourself.
yeah, I am unmuted, sir.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. It's a wonderful talk, and it has cleared a lot of doubts I had in my mind, and I thank you very much for that. And on the matter of tradition, tradition means it is a handing over from one to the other, like a grandfather to father, father to son, son to grandson, all that is there. And tradition is always in the past, right? So when you follow tradition, in fact, Krishnaji says in one of his talks, tradition has another meaning which says it is betrayal. So my question to you is, when I follow tradition, what am I betraying? Is it that I am betraying the present moment? Because life is unfolding in the present moment, and by following tradition, I am moving away from life. I am moving away from the present moment. I request you to answer this. And also one small question. Though Krishnamurti is on the Mount Everest, when he talks to people, elderly people and other educated people and all, but when he talks to the children in Krishnamurti schools, I have seen many of those videos, he comes down very nicely to their level. He talks with a lot of affection and love and try to understand them and try to connect with them. Is that so?
Well,
Ravi sir.
when Krishnamurti said that the trouble with India is that Brahmins have forgotten the tradition, what do you think he's saying? That they have forgotten how to repeat the tradition? This is his remark, that's not my remark. That the
Yeah,
trouble
yeah.
with India is that the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition. This is in response to your question about the meaning of the word tradition. Every word can have many different meanings. It could also mean, which is what most of the time it seems to mean, Tradition is whatever the Pandits are saying in the temple. If I should follow it and give them some more money, that's the tradition. One can mean anything by tradition. But when Krishnamurti makes this remark that the trouble with India is that the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition, that's not my remark. I was simply quoting him. What do you think he's trying to convey? That would be the response to what you're asking. Whatever you think is Krishnamurti saying. So I
It's
don't
very
need.
confusing, sir. On one hand, he says tradition is the past. On the other hand, he says somebody has forgotten the tradition. I think a little more clarity from your side, sir.
It is also another thing which is important to remember, that Krishnamurti was not always very consistent. In fact,
Correct.
he even makes this remark himself, that consistency, I'm quoting him, consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. And I give you a specific example of this. On one occasion, I had been very struck by the Song of Songs in the Old Testament, in the Abrahamic tradition, which more or less slightly corresponds in its feeling with Gita Govinda in India. And he said, I mentioned this to Krishnamurti, and he said, that is my most favorite book in the Bible. And then, partly coming from the academic circles that I come, I just mentioned to him that Rabbi Akiva, a great Jewish rabbi, in fact had said that although all the days are holy, but the day this book, which is called the Song of Songs, the day this book was revealed, that is the holiest of all days. Then Krishnamurti turns to me and says, I haven't read your Bible. This is 10 minutes after saying what is his most favorite book in the Bible. So one need not get so stuck with this remark or that remark of Krishnamurti. So similarly about tradition, he occasionally pointed out that tradition and also the other side, that destroying the tradition, both come from the same root. Treason and tradition actually have the same etymological root. So therefore we need to be very careful not to get stuck with, not each time he's meaning the same thing by the same word. But in this particular remark, that the trouble with India is that the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition, my understanding is, you people don't have to agree with this, my understanding is that what we have forgotten is an impartial self-inquiry and more freedom from me. That's what we have forgotten. That's the heart of all spiritual teaching, including Krishnamurti's teaching or the Buddha's teaching. There it gets expressed as freedom from fear and desire, or Christ says the same thing in a slightly different way. Sometimes it gets said dying to yourself. It gets said in dozens of different ways. But that's the heart of the teaching.
Thank you, sir. Very nicely explained. Thank you.
Shakti ji, please unmute and say.
Shakti Kumar, please speak.
Sir, one comment and one question.
A bit loud, sir.
One comment and one question. Is reaching? My voice is reaching?
Yeah.
Perhaps effort implies inner conflict and suppression, whereas attempt implies willingness and free inquiry. The question is, you see, Krishnamurti, when he says observer is the observed, do you see some connection of this statement with Vigyataram Are Ken Vijaniyat? Thank you, sir.
Well, I don't know specifically with this remark, but in the Yoga Sutras, it's not only observer and the observed are the same, but there is the third element, observing. This is what Patanjali speaks about, that all these three, observer, observed, and observing, or observation, if you like, all need to come together. And in a way, one doesn't need to especially even get stuck with this word or that word, but the point that what is being pointed to is that if I am looking at something, but I remain separate from it and can pass a judgment on it, I like it or I don't like it, that is not allowed me to really understand that something, that I need to essentially become one with it. And as I said, Patanjali, actually in the Yoga Sutras, different kind of samadhis he speaks about, where bringing the observer, observed, and the observation or observing together. And then the description of samadhi, this is in the third chapter or third sutra of the third chapter in Yoga Sutra, Swarup Shunya, complete freedom from oneself. Swarup Shunya, that is samadhi, according to Patanjali. Do you think Krishnamurti would disagree with this in any way?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sorry,
Madam Lakhsmi.
Namaste, Ravi Ravindra. This is second time I am listening to your lecture. First time I listened in the international convention, and that time I thought it's very, very creative. And today I'm very happy with each and every point of view. Mainly that point, that is, we have to start from our level. We shouldn't imagine that Krishnamurti said like this or like that. And not only one point, every point I like, and mainly this point is very essential so that we can understand and there will be life in whatever we are talking. If we don't be like that, we'll be only in imaginative way only. Thank you.
Sir, you wanted to comment on it?
I'm afraid I have to confess I did not understand a single word of what she said. But if somebody else has understood or heard it, please speak. I didn't hear a single word. I don't know.
We will repeat it perhaps.
I even wondered what language she was using, but
I am saying what I am happy with each and every sentence of you. And secondly, you said that we have to start with our level. Whatever we understand, in whatever level we have to understand, then we have to proceed. And that point I like very much. Then there will be life and learning. Thank you.
I will request my friend Vinita if she can say something about this, because I didn't really quite understand this again. Maybe the problem may be with my hearing more than anything else. Getting old has its problems, let me tell you this. Can you unmute yourself, Vinita, please?
Yes. Raviji, she is saying she's extremely happy with every single thing that you have said. She agrees with that, and she feels very happy that you have brought up these points. And the second thing she has said is that what you said about starting at one's own level is such an important thing, and she's really glad that you said that, and it's very important, and one can start from where one is.
Well, thank you very much for pointing this out, and I wholly agree with you. Am I Miyakshmi, or I don't know, it says the way it's, how do you say Miyakshmi?
Lakhsmi.
Lakhsmi.
But it says IAKSH. You look at his.
Yeah.
Huh? Okay, in any case, Mr. Pradeep, please speak.
Yes. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ravindra. It was like a fresh breeze. Your talk was like a fresh breeze, and it was so different, even though you were talking about Krishnamurti, but I could listen to your heart, and I'm speaking from my heart. You see, you were explaining beautifully effort is an abomination, and why it is taken very differently by most of the people. For me, simply, where why he would have said this. If little self or desire is the basis for your effort, then naturally it narrows down the whole vista. So that is one thing. Another statement he used to give, knowledge is an impediment.
Yes.
Again, if knowledge is glorifying your ego or your little self, then it will definitely distort everything. This is simply, I have understood him like this: where little self is there, it distorts or it creates problem. It may create problem. So this is, even your last talk when you gave, it was so different that I bought this Ravi Ravindra. I'm reading it very seriously, certain points, because you have a very good background of your um, uh, mm, different religions and sects and psychology. So it was different then only, and today again it is much richer than what I could get earlier. Thank you very much. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you, but I hope whatever I say or whatever anybody says, seriously to ask, how is this true for me, for yourself? That's I really wish that as to be a searcher rather than a believer. Thank you very much. Hareshwar Singh.
Hareshwarji. Hareshwarji.
Okay, I hope I am audible enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Now, first of all, very happy to see Ravi ji and then Richard Sharp and Vinita. I mean, all those people. I spent my 4 or 5 wonderful days at Theosophy grounds, which was my old dream. Secondly, I mean, I congratulate Ravi ji on coining a phrase about tradition. The very topic is so provocative that anybody would be feel compelled to say something. So let me start with what Mr. Murthy said. Or somebody said, tradition which has lost, tradition which is past. Tradition is essentially, in essence, tradition is past. Now, let me draw an analogy. I am standing on the banks of the Ganga. Doesn't matter Manikarnika Ghat, the Saswamedh Ghat, or the Ghat of in Patna, the Ganga. I am standing there, the Ganga. I am seeing the water flowing. Now, what I am seeing is the past? Certainly not. But isn't it true that when this water started from Gomukh, or some of you who are not familiar with the term Gomukh, they are familiar with the term Gangotri. When the water started from Gangotri, it has become past. And when it will merge in the Bay of Bengal, it is the future. But what I am seeing, the water of the Ganga, polluted or clean, whatever it is the present. So tradition is like the flowing river. It depends upon us, how, upon our perspective of the tradition. Second thing, tradition which has lost its soul. Now, again, let me take the analogy of the Ganga or the Mother Earth. Many, particularly the Indian tradition, considers Earth as a living entity. That is why they say Dharti Mata, Prithvi Mata. Now, somebody tells me that the Earth, yes, it had a soul once. When God created this universe, and then in due course the earth also materialized, then it had a soul. But now, since the earth has been polluted, the soul has left. I must ask honestly myself, can I connect with the soul? There is a belief that for years in Chinese tradition of painting, the painter would meditate in front of a tree and for 12 years, 15 years, and he would not or she would not start painting unless there was no gap between the painter and the tree. So I must ask myself, a tradition, any Hindu, Buddhist tradition or whatever, whether it had truly lost its soul, have I caught, grabbed the soul of it? Soul means what? Essence. And personally, I feel the essence of any religion is the same, that the individual self has somehow, by some grace or miracle or through effort or effortlessness, has to terminate at a point where the cosmic self itself remains, not the individual self. What Kabir said, first Kabir said, Bund samana samudra mein, and then he qualified his statement, who am I to travel to the ocean? So samudra samana bund mein, the whole ocean has been poured over me. Last but not least, I would like to juxtapose two things. Raviji said, abomination, he himself, he quoted Krishnamurti, abomination or of effort. I want to juxtapose this with the profound statement when he made, karmane, nasha, karmana, whatever it is. Is it possible that I'm in a state of mind or consciousness or being where I am not doing my own stuff, where I am a vehicle for some another outside, not exactly outside, but where something bigger which is acting through me? And my own feeling is that before I become receptive enough to be a true vehicle or instrument in the hands of the divine, just like Arjuna had to struggle until he truly became an instrument in the hands of Krishna. So, effort or no effort, it depends upon what. To me, I am a family man. Taking care of my children or my wife or the two kittens which are my pets itself is great effort. I traveled the other day from Chennai to Pune, and the way people are littering the train compartment and the bogie, and keeping my cool, not throwing my anger at it itself is tapas. I don't have to stand in the Ganga in the winter to do tapascharya. So keeping my cool, and I dare say in India people don't need to do any tapasya if you live with what Krishnamurti says, integrity. And somebody at Rishi Valley, I'm sure Harshad Parekh or somebody can correct if I am wrong. Somebody challenged Krishnamurti at Rishi Valley. So, in the students' talk, you are telling us to be completely truthful, not to compromise integrity. If I do that, I will die. I can't survive in India. I will die. And Krishnamurti said, so die. Doesn't matter. Life will go on. So, if in India you pay your income taxes correctly, if you don't bribe a single official, okay, to get your justice, if you don't bribe, your whole life will be a yajna. You will be running from pillar to post. You don't have to do any tapas, any penance. So, effort, but yes, I agree with Krishnamurti, where there is no spiritual effort. If at all, then Yamaniyam of Patanjal and Sheel of Buddhism and Krishnamurti is laying the foundation of meditation, which categorically he enumerated in Krishnamurti's notebook. And then he say, now you have done your bit. Now it is a matter of the breeze coming through the window. Now the window, you can't You can't force the breeze to enter your room. You have done your bit, and have patience. Wait, but not wait for something. So personally, I don't know. I may be terribly fool, but I don't see that there is anything separate like spiritual effort. Now somebody may challenge me. Okay, somebody who is putting flowers and jalam on Shivalinga and all that effort, okay, is it useful? I would say I don't know whether it is useful, but if truth is truly a pathless land, then whatever you do is immaterial. It is not going to hinder your discovery of the divine. If truth is truly a pathless land, then nothing that you do can take away from the ultimate, that land which is pathless. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I think now probably we have had enough. So should we bring this to a close, Mr.
Yeah,
Parekh?
please, sir. Please, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for subtler than mind lecture. Thank you.
Good
Modak,
wishes to
please
all of
end
you.
it. Modak,
Good
please
wishes.
end it.
Okay.